Hi, this is Dr. Ali Mugable, and we're doing scholarly outcomes, databases, and social networks. This is part of our research skills course. So let's get started. We have three main objectives. The first objective is to identify, understand, and identify key scholarly outcomes. What are the scholarly outcomes? And we need to distinguish them. The second one is to get familiar with the research databases. And the third one is to have an idea about social networks for researchers. The first objective is the biggest objective. And kind of byproduct, we have to go across the scientific databases and some research social networks. Scholarly outcomes. What are scholarly outcomes? This guy shown here is a person who was doing research. But he was doing research and he never published. So it says here, either publish, it's perish, or publish, it's publish or perish. So if you don't publish your work, if you have no evidence, the academician, people in the research society will tell you, provide a permanent archival record. So we can define scholarly outcomes as permanent archival records, where people can go back to them and check out your research. So what are scientific outcomes of a scientific research? The first possible record is the journal articles. Under journal articles, we have different variations: transactions, letters, magazines, surveys, tutorials, comments, communication, brief reports, or review. You might even think of others, but most of these can be listed under the category of journal articles. Then we have the conference proceedings. So the main two, journal articles, and then we have conference proceedings. In the coming slides, we'll talk more about the difference between them, and we'll just give you an idea about what are they. So when you do your research, you need to publish it, to have it in a permanent record. One option is to have a journal article, another is to have a conference publication. Then we can think of others, including patents, book, writing your outcome into books or even book chapters. If you're doing MS or PhD, Masters or PhD, you can have your work in thesis or dissertation. And your work also can be part of standards, like the IEEE standards. And you also could have your work in a technical reviewed report. So in the coming few slides, we'll try to give you some hint about which is which and how and where do we publish our work. So we can say now, if somebody asks what's the difference between letters, communication, and full journals, the details here inside. Why do we all call them journals? What's the main difference between them? So we can say that the difference depends on the specific field, whether you're doing electrical engineering, science, mechanical, or chemical engineering, what have you. The difference is field dependent, and also it depends on the journal itself. Some journals, they have comments, some they have review letters, some they have both. So it depends on the field and the journal itself. And the major difference is in the allowable, or the main differences are in the allowable length, how big, how large is the size, how many pages. So we have the allowable length, and the amount of review. So if you have for example, if you have a full journal transaction paper, it will have to go through full review. It's usually long in size, while letters are shorter. Some reviews, they don't go over rigorous review. So the difference between them is in the size, in the size of number of pages and the review they go through. So now let's go into more details. Journal or a conference. Where should I publish my work? In a journal or a conference? I'm showing here in the slide two examples: the IEEE Transactions or Communication and the IEEE Censor Journal. This is just two journals that I'm interested in. And you can see now that a journal article is, the hard copy, how it looks from outside. A journal article is a fully developed presentation of the work and its final findings. So if you have done a work and it's complete in that regard, for example, you are looking for a certain medication or medicine for a certain virus, and then you have done all the testings, all the results, then you can have your work presented in a journal because your work is fully developed and the work has got to the final stage. So there are some characteristics of a journal. Advance the state of the art. So if you submit a work, your work should provide advances in the state of the art. You should add, it should have some original work. It should provide novel insight. And then it should be clear. It should have clear conclusions and supported by the data. The conclusion should be clear. There should be some outcome out of your work. And this outcome should be supported by data, simulation, theory. It should be supported. Nowadays we have different types of journals. We have open access journals where the author pay the cost of publication and the audience can have free access to the article. Or we have the traditional way where the author does not pay, but the reader who subscribes to the journal will have to pay. Now, in a journal article, you prepare your work, you write it in a certain format. Usually every journal has its own submission guidelines. And we'll go into that maybe later on when we come to writing the final paper. But you need to visit the journal of interest and find the submission guidelines. It could take from a month to a year or 2 years to get your work published. There is fast track, there are some journals that are quick and some that are relatively slow. But you submit your work and it go through a review and you get a feedback whether your work is accepted, rejected, or requires changes. So in a journal, it's usually online correspondence that you submit your work through a system and you get some feedback. And the other option is to submit your work through a conference. A conference where people will get together. It's usually located in a certain country, city, location. So there's a major difference between the two. In a conference article, at the end of the conference, usually they have proceedings. They print all the articles and they publish them. So a conference article can be written while research is ongoing. So if you are currently doing a work, you finish 1-2 years and you have some preliminary results you want to show to the community, get some feedback. So it will suit more for the conference articles. You submit to the conference, you go speak with others and get networked. So in conference articles, you can present preliminary results or highlight recent work. Gain informal feedback as people on the conference. You stand up, you present, or you have a poster session. It's not just like in journal where your work will show up in the journal. No, you have to go and present your work. Conference articles are typically shorter than journal articles with fewer details and fewer references. I'll give you more as we go on about the difference between a journal and a conference paper. Now, just like I showed you one example of two examples of journals, here is how a website for a conference would look like. This is ICASP, and the website is given here if you want to try it. Of course, it will change with the years, but this is one example of a very popular conference where you go there, you find the registration cost and the submission guidelines, and it gives you more details about the venue, travel, and who is going to sponsor the conference, and who is going to be there, workshops, how many keynote speakers, and so on. Magazines. Another important scholarly outcome are magazines, where magazines are characterized by regular and they have continuing issues with significant technical content. But in addition to that, they have usually general news and regular columns. So they usually address contemporary issues, new issues, and they usually have addressed the society, like the communication or signal processing society or whatever society you may have. Examples of these, we have the IEEE communication magazines, microwave magazine, and we have also Signal Processing Magazine, Instrumentation and Measurements, and others. Usually in every, let's say, society or subtract, you'll find that they have journals and at least one magazine to address the new issues and related. But they have some technical depth, and in addition to that, they have news and regular columns. All right. We're still now talking about different variations of journals or subclasses of journals. So sometimes we have something called communication, letters, and review. Communications and letters kind of very similar or somehow related. So some people would call communication, an article is called communication or brief report. Usually it's smaller than 2,000 words with limited other restrictions on the number of tables and figures. And also it usually goes through a full peer review. So it will be reviewed just like a normal paper. And a single small finding is usually covered by the communication. It's not a very detailed. You're just taking one topic and you're fully covering that. So it has some depth. It has a real depth, but it's not very wide, covering one single issue usually. And this is why it's usually not a full paper, because you're tackling only one side of the problem. Letters, again, you will not find both in the same journal, maybe rarely, but letters are form of publications. They are for publication of brief papers, usually 3 to 4 pages in length, and they are primarily defined as being short, sometimes less than 1,000 words. The details here will really vary from one journal to other. So 3-4 pages will be more than 1,000 words, but for some journals it will be 3-4 pages, for some would be just 1,000. So you can see there is some overlap between communication and letters. So letters report a single piece of information, often from part of a very large study, and at times the letter is a response to another paper. So there is one claim in another paper and you have a different view, or you want support in a different way, so you can write a letter to support that. And we have also reviews, and reviews are distinct from this, because usually in reviews there is no clear original research. There is a new topic going on, the use of, for example, of artificial intelligence or machine learning in finding medications for a certain disease. Then, okay, you're not coming up with a new contribution. You're just reviewing what's being done in the field. It might sound like easy, but usually these reviews are rigorous, and it's not for everybody. Usually they are by invitation. So you're lucky if you can get a review paper accepted, because usually they invite the very popular keynote speakers or authors, and they ask them to write in a certain field. That will help the journal to get more citation. So with that, we have a brief idea about the different variations of journals, being small, being large full-size paper, or small letter or communication or review. Okay, now I want also to give you an idea, since we talk a lot about journals, I would like you to learn a little bit about conference management. I would like you to log into edas.info. This is a website for managing conferences. So you have the following requirement. This is your practice. So you can stop, freeze the video, and do the following. Go to this website, edas.info, and then register your name. Okay, create your username and password and give your details. And then go to search, submit a paper, and then find conferences to apply for. Rank those conferences according to topic, date, or location. Because sometimes, of course, you are interested in a certain topic, but sometimes you have limitations on the date, so you want to make sure that the submission is before a given deadline, or you have limitations on the location. So this will rank conferences. This is just one example of conference management website. But you can freeze the video now and go and visit the website and generate all these details. Please share your answers or share your views on if you go there in the comments. There are some videos about the use of edas.info, but I find this is too much. I think they are self-explanatory, and the website is designed in a way that allows you to maneuver easily. Since we have spent some time with journals and conferences, and patents is one example of scholarly outcomes, why not just quickly go over the difference between patent, copyright, and trademarks. Patent is the grant of a property right to the inventor, saying that you are the one who came up with the idea, so you get the patent. Copyright is a form of protection provided to the authors, whether the work is published or not published. And then we have the trademark. It's just a word or name or symbol that or a device that's used on the product, on the goods, to say that this is the source. It comes from that trademark or that source of goods. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys know the difference between these two. So we're focusing on patents. Okay, we might have confused you with lots of outcomes, scholarly outcomes, conference, publications, journals. So what should we go for, conferences or journals? We might have hinted to the answer, but let's give some more comments or tips. Before we go on to answering this question, I'm just sharing with you on the side here Science and Nature, two very popular journals with very high impact on the society. So you would better know the Science and Nature journals. Now back to the question, should I go for Science, Nature, others? Should I go for simpler journals or conferences? Okay, the answer to going to journal or conference should be relatively depends on the research area. In some fields, top-ranked conferences are equally or even more prestigious than journals. Sometimes publishing in IEEE ICC, International Conference on Communication, is more difficult than publishing in a journal. And other conferences like ICASP, International Conference in Acoustics and Speech and Signal Processing, is also not easy. You can think of other examples. So if the conference is prestigious, then the work can go to a journal or a conference. In engineering disciplines, we have journal papers that are typically more important, and most of the records or qualification of faculty will rely more on the journal publications rather than just conferences. Conferences are important, but not as equally as journals. Conferences are generally seen as places for scientific networking. So if you want to show that you are networked, you are active, you participate into conferences to share your initial research results, get some feedback. A high quality conference paper must eventually find its way into a journal paper. So most of the excellent conference papers are finally will be published with some extension in a journal paper. You cannot publish the same work in most cases, so you have to do some extensions. Most journal papers are expanded versions of the conference paper, as I just mentioned. There should be really good amount of expansion or development, especially nowadays with the use of automatic cross-check databases where you need to submit to a conference or a journal. They will search all the records, so it will show some match with your conference work. So you cannot have duplicate publications. The choice of journal, the exact journal, will depend on many things. How prestigious is the journal, the impact factor, the quality of the work, and so on. Now, we'll say more about the submission later on when we come to the full final paper. Here's an example of the issue of impact factor. So when we talk about, there is a difference between quality and impact. This difference should be very clear, because many people confuse quality with impact. Because you could have a very high impact by writing a very bad paper that people criticize everywhere, and this is a large impact but low quality. So we talk about citations, number of citations, and impact factor. So number of citations is important to the journal and the author. The impact factor is a measure of how many citations, how much impact you have. So I'm not going to explain everything here, just I'm sharing with you a snapshot of my current Google Scholar outcomes. It shows the publications here, and it shows the year of publication, and also it shows the number of citations. How many papers cited this work? For example, this paper was cited 215 times. and others the numbers are given. So you can continue. I'm just giving you a snapshot. And there it shows the years and number of citations. Of course, these numbers could be much larger, but for our case, we have the H index equal to 15. What's the H index? The H index is, for an author, it's a level metric that attempts to measure both the productivity and the number of citations or impact. So if it's 15 here, it means at least I have 15 publications with at least 15 citations. If this was 20, it means that we have at least 20 journals with 20 or 20 journals exactly with 20 citations or more. It's not the time to explain this. I'm just giving you the link here. Your job is to understand the meaning of H index by visiting the link. And then I would like you to understand also what is the meaning of I10 index, which is shown here. It shows like 21. So please find out and write your answer in the comment section. Okay, here are additional resources. Calculate your scientific impact. As I mentioned here, we're now focusing on the scholarly outcomes, but I thought it's good to share with you some idea, because choosing the where to publish will affect you as a researcher. So if you want to learn more about how to find your scientific impact or a paper scientific impact, I'm sharing you with you the following article. The link will also be in the description. Another research impact overview is also another article shown here. I'm going to share these two in the description. Scientific research databases. Since we have addressed, we said the choice of where to publish will affect you as a researcher, number of citations, it will affect your H index, and it's also it varies according to a different impact factor by the journals. Now here are some databases that I would like to share with you, because this indexing, finding how many citations, will vary from one database to another. At least for electrical engineering and most of the engineering, Scopus is one of the very important databases, and journals listed there are IEEE journals. They have, in the Scopus, they have 22,000 titles, over than 5,000 publishers, with more than 20,000 peer-reviewed journals. And it's a very important database. It covers technical, scientific, medical, and social sciences, and even some arts and humanities. The other database is Web of Science or webofknowledge.com. It's an online, it's subscription based, so you have to be subscribed. Our university has a subscription, a citation indexing service, and whatever is in Web of Science is ISI, considered ISI journals. Like in our university, for promotion requirements, they require that your publication to be counted towards promotion is to have an ISI journal, Institute for Scientific Information. Institute for Scientific Information. Okay, so this is the ISI. It would be listed under Web of Science. Google Scholar is very comprehensive. It's a freely accessible web search engine that indexes full text or metadata. It's accessible. You can go. We have Google. We have Google Scholar, and then we have also IEEE Explore. This is the example of our field. This would vary from one field to another. For us, IEEE Explore is a very important reference, a scholarly research database that indexed abstract, and it has full text service. IEEE stands for International Electrical and Electronics Engineers Association. So I give you three kind of generic examples and one for your specific field. If you are not an electrical engineer, you can write on the comments what is important for you, mechanical, chemical, or whatever field you are in. That would be very useful, and we can update our records. Now, as you start building your record on the databases, you will need a ResearchID to distinguish your name. You know, many people could have the same name, like for example in China or so. To distinguish the author, to distinguish yourself, you could have a ResearchID, identification number. And again, there are different people started with different ways of getting ID numbers. There is ORCid, there is Scopus identification, author identification, there is Web of Science Research ID, Google Scholar Citation Profile, and Publons. So I advise you to go to ResearchID and create your ORCid and create your own ID number, even if you don't have publication. So you'll have an ERN number indicating that you got into the field quickly. And by the way, these are now interrelated, so if you go to one, they will start asking you for permission to go from one another, and they will exchange information. So what we have in this slide is ResearcherID, finding an ID for the researcher. So your practice, your job now is to freeze the video and create your own ResearchID. Now let's conclude. Just like we have Facebook, Twitter, and other social networks, it's very important for researchers to have their own research presence or social presence. And very popular website is the ResearchGate. It allows you to create your profile, and it will give you some matches with others. It will share with you some suggested references. I think it's very useful website. Other websites, some of them are commercial and they tend to be noisy, like for example others. We have also Academia.edu, Mendeley, and ResearchID. I strongly advise you, although there is just my personal experience, I've been working with ResearchGate and find it very effective. Okay, thank you. To summarize here, we have covered the scholar outcomes and related social networks and databases. We'll see you on the coming video, and we'll talk more about these things as we come to the submission of the paper and the review process. Thank you again.